Hello, everybody. I'm going to adjust my mic. Uh, we are here today with more Valloward excitement, our campaign of Court of Blades, and today we will be joined by a couple of Drakes, the designers of the game themselves. So I'm very excited about this. We've already been doing some world building for Valloward since we're creating our own setting. We played Ex Novo by Shark Bomb Games to do some of our initial stuff. And then I've done a couple of world building streams, and you all are seeing just how much work goes into making a world that you can then hold in your head and respond to improvisationally when your players do something totally preposterous, which I'm sure they won't do whatsoever. Hello, the Rising Tides. At some point soon, you will need to leave, otherwise, you will gain forbidden knowledge because you are in this game. So, we have some folks here. I am going to go through some quick stage business. When this stream is done in 24 hours, you will be able to watch it at youtube.com/ArvinElleron. As a reminder, this is a Speculate joint project with twitch.tv/ArvinElleron. So I'm one of the co-hosts, Michael R. Underwood, along with the Rising Tides, aka Brandon O'Brien, and our host, Gregory A. Wilson, aka Arv. We are playing Court of Blades, so !Court will give you a link to one of the places where you can get copies of Court of Blades. And when I introduce the Drakes, I will also invite them to tell us where you all can find other games that they have created, perhaps including something new, foreshadowing. Other stuff from this, you should, if you are a backer on the Gray Shade Kickstarter, there should be an update for you in your email within the last day or so make sure to check that out as they make progress on both the novel side and the game side. And there are many other commands. I'm going to say the ones I remember include BLM, because it is important to repeat, affirm, and assert the importance of Black lives and Black joy. So that command is there. We have thank you to the Rising Tides for the hashtag, or to the !Gray Shade command that gives you some information about the Kickstarter and what's going on with all of that. And I think I'm looking at something in chat. One of our mods is uncertain about something, and I want to make sure that we don't have anything exploding. But I think we're all right. So now what I'm going to do is, in just a moment, I'm going to hop over to our overlay where we will in fact be joined by a couple of Drakes in 3, 2, 1. Here we are. Hello! So now we all should be live, and I'm very happy to be joined by a couple of Drakes, the designers of Court of Blades, aka Navi and Shawn Drake. So they are named and labeled in left to right order there, so that you can know who is who. And now I will invite the Drakes to briefly introduce themselves to everybody who is watching, some of whom may not know about your extensive publishing portfolio and kind of who you are as designers. So please let everybody know.
Okay, well, I've been elected first. So I'm Shawn Drake. I am a writer, a tabletop game designer, and one half of the word punching couple of Drakes. We make all kinds of tabletop role-playing games, largely Forged in the Dark games or solo RPGs, things of that nature. We've been doing it for about a year and a half now. 2 years? Is it 2 years now? Oh my God, it's time. We ran a Kickstarter for Court of Blades last April, because I think that's how linear time works. Okay. And you guys were incredibly generous, and now we do this full time. So at this point, I think we've got like 11 games that we've released in various stages of completion, and a lot more on the way. So we make games that are mostly tightly focused on creating a certain experience and then mechanizing that experience so that it's repeatable and infinitely enjoyable. So that's kind of our motto: weird games quick. And so I'm gonna toss it over to Navi. Introduce yourself, and then I'll talk about the itch store and stuff.
Oh, cool. Okay. I'm Navi, and I'm actually getting to be kind of getting my hands into the GME side of things today. I never get to do the GM turn because I'm like always the like key play tester from the player's perspective, and he GMs everything. So I'm gonna be. It's interesting. I'm gonna be kind of like the third wheel here.
Behind the curtain.
It's gonna be fun. So this is not normally my wheelhouse, but I'm going to enjoy this immensely because it turns out I did write this turn despite not usually getting to interact with it. So that's really cool. But yeah, go ahead, talk about our store.
So we've got games available on a couple of drakes.itch.io. We also have some stuff up on Drive-Thru-RPG. You can find some of our stuff up there. But the easiest way to get a hold of us is through Twitter. I'm at Drake and Dice. She's at Navi Musing. We are loud and proud about everything that we do there. Or you can find us on our website, a couple of drakes.com. Did I miss one?
Phenomenal. Thank you very much. We have your itch link in the chat there for everybody. And I have just boosted y'all's volume. So thank you to Ugaron for letting me know. We want everyone to be able to hear folks nicely. And if our audio levels are similar, then that is going to be the most kind for everybody, because we don't apparently have a software or hardware universalizing audio stabilizer tool just yet.
Yeah, our mic was a little far away, so I also moved it closer. So let us know if we're now blowing your eardrums out.
Yes, please.
You're fine for me, but I will pay attention to see what is going on in chat. So with the GM turn, I found Blades in the Dark a few years ago, watched some actual plays, and that was really my first experience with the idea of a faction turn in terms of like getting into the nitty gritty. But Court of Blades goes one step further into the GM turn, and I'd love to ask y'all to kind of introduce a little bit of your philosophy behind having a GM turn and what you think it does for a game of Court of Blades.
So the GM turn, the idea behind a GM turn is that in the kind of fiction that we're trying to emulate, the city, the actual place where all this intrigue and skullduggery is happening, is a living city. So while you are making your plans and advancing your own agenda, there are other factions and other changes that are coming to the city that are happening at the same time. And balancing that tension of what you're doing versus what everybody else is doing is key. And it's also a really great generator for further fiction. So the necessity of a living, breathing setting for your players, your scoundrels, or whatever kind of PCs that you have, having something for them to bounce off of, react to, makes it feel like a more plausible and a more enjoyable place to get up to mischief.
And the GM turns also kind of there because not only is the city alive, but every house inside the city is also trying to progress an agenda, and there is a race happening to the top. We've mechanized your ability to climb the social ladder and to become that first house of the city. So it was important that there was something for all of the other houses to be able to move around and jockey for position as well, without it being a mental load on the GM, because that would normally be a lot of work figuring out who's maneuvering, how they're maneuvering. So in this way, everybody moves, everything changes, the positions of the houses change, and it creates tension for the players as well, because if their goal is to get their house to the top and they just saw that someone else moved up a rank, they're reminded that they're not the only ones with ambitions.
Nothing feels static is the biggest takeaway, and that's something that I first kind of encountered in Stars Without Number, a full-fledged game that the GM kind of played off on one side between sessions. I read that, loved it, but also it was a lot. So something that could be taken between sessions, or even in like the 15-minute break in the middle of your game, to generate further complications and fiction and fallout was the design goal. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like that this is one of the ways that you can convey the world pushing back. And so there's entanglements, you've got romantic entanglements for like an extra dimension of the game, and this idea that the other houses are making big moves. I'm glad that it is not extended to every one of the factions, because I have yet to, in running a Forged in the Dark game, do the thing where I roll dice for every one of 32 factions. I know that there's probably people out there who are kind of getting that full experience out of Forged games. I know that Stream of Blood did a really involved GM turn for their kind of big multi-crew campaign that they ran, I think, 2020 into 2021. But for this stream, we're going to just be focusing on the major factions part of the GM turn. And what I think I'll do now is I've pulled up my kind of GM turn notes page, and we're going to talk a little bit about what that process is going to be. I have the advantage and the pleasure of getting to introduce Valloward as a setting in terms of more details to the Drakes, who built a wonderful setting in Ilrienne that other teams like the Clever Corvids and a forthcoming game from Queen's Court Games are going to be utilizing, but we're adapting some of the structures from Ilrienne and from Court of Blades to our own setting. And for folks who have been watching will know that our coterie is serving House Vorster, who are mechanically being represented by House Battalia, which then means that we have 5 other houses to describe the plots of. And they are in ascending order of power. So we have the 6 great houses. House Vorster starts as house number 6. Despite their lofty origins, they've lost a few steps because there are not so many wars to be fought in the same fashion as there are with intrigue and magic and money. So the 5th house is House Sapphire, who are represented by Corvetto mechanically. We have House Lironti, who are represented by Almari. House Corinne, who are represented by Lavelle. House Fairest, who are represented by Bastien, and House Grey Mist are the current first leading house, and they are mechanically represented by Erlanda. So in the quick start, so I think I still have the earlier version of all of the house names in my head from the series that y'all did at Actual Play. Do you still put the R in that number 1 house, or is it?
Yeah, Erlanda? No,
okay.
No. I mean, when I run it at home, sometimes, but not always.
So that I did a home game of Court of Blades that was like non-broadcast, and I just had those pronunciations in my head, which is very funny. In that game, actually, the player characters went over and above and checked all of the boxes in their first season and got a crit on house development.
Yep.
So they upset things very quickly. Perhaps our crew for Speculate will do just the same.
They say that the wages of hard work are more hard work, though. So
yes, well, I just had to kind of raise the stakes and reevaluate what I thought was reasonable to get done during any given downtime action and be a little bit harder on them.
Yep.
So one thing that is very cool about this game is that we have a billion charts, and I've actually been working on charts for the Forged in the Dark game that I'm developing, so this is a good way to reorient myself and to cheat by looking at what other people have done previously. So do you all have dice on hand, or shall I roll and roll 20?
Why don't you roll and roll 20 for us? That
Sure
way I don't feel like I have my thumb on the scale.
Okay. So I'm going to adjust our thing in roll 20 so that we can see the dice. Live production on air. So we go one by one with the houses, and then we're just going to roll on the NPC house objectives chart, which, if you're following along in your copy of Court of Blades, is book page 281 in my copy. So we're just going to roll 1d6, and this is the first of several steps in deciding what the plot for the given houses. And this is going to be our plot for House Sapphire, who, for folks who followed the world building stream, yes, the Rising Tides, you are once again lovingly banished from the stream so that you don't get spoilers. So House Sapphire is the kind of newer oracular cult who also have some relationship to the great lake creature who may or may not live in a perfectly circular lake on Valor Island. I'm sure I'm sure nothing strange is happening there. There may or may not be a Loch Ness monster style lake monster who possibly is from an entirely different planet or dimension. Who knows?
Good.
Very, very simple, normal fantasy stuff. So for our first result, we've gotten 3, which is a 6-part slight clock. And then, yes, this will be tricky, because I'm going to have to go back and forth. But I think I can make it work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say have Sapphire, and that is going to be a 6-part slight clock. And would one or both of y'all love to, could you explain reach, grasp, and sleight for the audience?
Absolutely. So reach, grasp, and sleight are the 3 stats, for lack of a better term, the abstractions of the kinds of power that a house can wield. Reach is kind of your temporal range, like where you have influence. It's your ability to not necessarily project military power, but to project influence. Grasp is more the ability to seize by force, hold what you have, defend against all comers, and sleight is your ability to maneuver without notice, hide your true intentions, or lie through your teeth. So those 3 stats are kind of abstractions that help us know what a faction, what their preferred modus operandi is. Their highest stat will tell you their general mean and bearing, while also kind of revealing weaknesses as well. So a slight clock in this case for House Sapphire seems fairly in keeping if they're keeping something under wraps with the lake monster, and they're a new kind of upstart cult. Like that's juicy, and I like that. So a 6-part slight clock.
Great. And so now we're going to roll for House Lironti. And so much like Almari in Ilrien, House Lironti are people from Rontis, which is a nearby island in this archipelago. Rontis is not blessed by the abundant magic or fertile lands that Valor Isle has. And so there are frequently influxes of refugees, like basically weather refugees from Rontis to Valor Isle. And House Lironti are kind of a set of folks from Rontis who have been around long enough to kind of ingratiate and install themselves in Valloward culture. So they have that kind of insider-outsider vibe that made them a good fit for the mechanics of Almari. And they are going to do an 8-part reach clock, which is going to be reach, and it was only in the last, I'd say, year or so that I discovered how tricky it is to type and say the same thing at the same time, which is a streaming skill that I have realized is important, but very strange. All right, so then we're rolling for the Corinnes. And they are going to get an 8-part grasp clock. The dice have been kind in not repeating their numbers thus far, but now I maybe have jinxed myself. As we roll for the Fairest are also going to do a 8-part grasp clock.
Nobody has started off with an agenda that isn't at least suited to something that will at least get 1 die to roll when it comes time to advance. That's
all
good.
right. And last but certainly never least, House Greymist are going to do a 6-part reach clock. Okay, and so again, we're looking at that, and so it looks like all of these houses are pretty well posed to be able to make some good progress on these clocks. When we the roles for how well do these houses do in progressing these won't happen until the end of the social season, and this also gives our coterie the chance to investigate and foil one or more of these house plots. I'm curious to hear from y'all from the design perspective. When did the ability to interfere with other houses' plots come into play when thinking about the GM turn?
That was pretty early in the game. It was important in a political game for you to be able to undermine the other houses. It's a little Game of Thronesy, right? Like that's a good touchstone. I think everybody in the world knows of. You kind of put your moles out there or whatever it takes to figure out what they're doing because you need to stop them in order to even not even if not even if their agenda is necessarily has anything to do with it you're trying to accomplish. You just simply need to stop them from doing better because you need to make them look bad or you don't want them to get ahead of you. So that was something that came up really early in the game as far as being able to play a really fleshed out political game. Like, how do we mess with everyone else?
Yeah, it's not enough to just have their agendas laid bare. You have to be able to foil them because that's how you win, right?
Yeah, and I think the use of the intrigue downtime action is a really elegant way of attaching this kind of really distinct mechanical system to the more traditional Forge in the Dark flywheels of like missions and heat or its equivalent and things like that. So as I'm working on a Forged game, thinking about those intersecting gears has been really important, and I think it's a smart move to make it so that you can basically act on multiple scales but use the same downtime economy to be able to do so. I found that really easy to do in my home game, and that will make things easier for us here.
Right.
This bit of conversation has given me the opportunity to scroll down and find the relevant tables for our next portion, which is very convenient. So yeah, what we're going to do is we're going to go through a couple of charts that will give us the kind of unpacked version of what any given mission is going to be. And that's going to give us basically some keywords that then we're going to have to flesh out into an actual enough notes that I, as the GM, can remember what's going on and then be able to suggest or gesture toward it for the player characters when they get to downtime. And then if they kind of uncover stuff, then I will kind of give them more and more information. And I like the idea, or I like this structure in that it will give you a few bits that are inspirational but are not prescriptive. And that makes it easier to interpret and definitely makes it easier for me to adjust what is written here to a distinct setting, even if that setting is written to be in a lot of ways parallel to Ilrian.
Yep. Human mind is pretty incredible in being able to put together a pattern out of seemingly disparate things.
And it makes it so that if you get the same combination of words twice in a game, it doesn't have to be the same mission, the same thing happening. It's completely different because the house that it's happening to affects it, and just the situation has changed. Exactly. So it makes it so that you don't have to have a pick list 20 miles long,
which we started on.
We often over design and then go, okay, well, but how do we make this usable? Because at the end of the day, we want everyone to be able to interact with mechanics fluidly and easily. And sometimes overreaching like that, like you really pulling back is less is more in game design. So this is one of those situations where a stripped down list of things that can happen and then you connect them is much more elegant than here's exactly what's happening.
Also makes for a book that you can carry.
Right. Yeah, especially in the era of ever more expensive paper.
Amen.
Yeah, and I think from the perspective of a writing prompt, a few even 3 words or a short phrase is easier for I think a lot of writers, if not most writers, to get started on than blank page, write me a story. And a lot of those processes I find to be fairly parallel between kind of a prose style storytelling and idea generation and something for a tabletop game.
Certainly.
So I'm going to bring the stream back over to Roll20 real quick. And uncover there so that we can see our dice. So now we're rolling on table 1, part 2. We have a 6-part reach clock for Sapphire. So I'm going to roll another 1d6. And that gets us a 1, so we're looking at make an easy ally. Nope, wrong chart. I want...
for a slight. So turn
for a
an
slight,
asset.
so... yes, turn an asset. Thank you. All right, I think I'm going to do the first part of all of these now for less bouncing around the
That'll be fun. Cover
the
it piece by
page.
piece.
Yep. So this next one. And so we have a 5 for Liranti, which is an 8-part reach clock. And so they are going to corner a market. And we have the world building in the Ex Novo game just kind of organically focused a lot on agriculture and natural resources. And so a lot of the stuff that I think are going to be like the economic and market forces that are going to be important are like who has access to the oracular fruit, who has better deals with the Farmers Guild, which is like a proto-union, who has a better relationship with the groves of the Queen's apples, which are another like major crop here. And so we have like, oh, okay, it's not just like this island does cane sugar.
Right.
We don't have a monocrop or even like a single biome island. There's a lot going on in the natural world.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So
As it should be.
that part of world building is often something that I have to kind of come back to. So it was really handy to have the players like giving a lot there. So we've got a 2 for Corinne, which is an 8-part grasp, which is disrupt a supply line.
Seeing contention starting to build already.
Yeah, like
Corner market. Well, I'm going to disrupt the supply line. Watch this.
Right. Do these end up connected, or are they going to be like orthogonal?
Parallel.
Yeah. So next we're doing an 8-part grasp for House Fairest, which is another 2.
Also disrupting the supply line.
Okay.
They really don't like that market.
I hate that market. Never seen anybody so angry.
Yeah, like because they could end up targeting the same supply line but with different methods.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or it could be some other situation because we've got these subsequent clocks. And then
Even just the way that their particular house strengths lend themselves and the manner in which they approach it.
Okay, and
Who does it first?
The last roll is a 1. So that looks like a make an easy ally. Okay, so as I get ready to go to the next chart, how often did you find or did you think that you'd have different houses kind of taking some of these same approaches, or are there trends that you found in this chart that you start to read as a GM, or you found that people have been doing?
So, as a GM, like I'm always looking for those linkages and what repeats fairly often. I think the charts themselves, like especially in the beginning when it's just the 2d6, your initial clock, and then the breakout beneath. We tried to keep them relatively broad and interpretive. They narrowed down significantly more with the next two charts. So at this point, like from this point, you'll see a lot of overlap. And if that's an interesting thing for you as a GM, you can start to kind of pit these houses against each other. But I think that's the easy answer. The more difficult answer is that they are doing this unwittingly, because in the fiction, what they're doing makes sense for really any house to make this their play for greater power. If there's a market that needs cornering, like everybody wants to corner that market, several people will be trying to corner that market. Let's see what their method is, and let's see what their success looks like, because that's where the story lives. So, have thoughts on that?
No, I think you got it.
Okay.
All right, and then as I remember it, under Table 2, Part 1, I'm going to roll once for basically the strength frame that the house is going to use, and then another die underneath that strength frame to get a specific detail, which is kind of it's almost the detail for their abstracted engagement roll.
Correct.
Great. So again, I'm going to jump back to dice, and what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to roll 2 dice at a time, and I'm going to take Part 1 and then Part 2, and that will save us a little bit of time. Great, so we're back on the dice. So we've got 5, 6 for House Sapphire, so that is using magic, spirit. Yeah, and this will prompt discussion about kind of some of the cosmology of Valloward, because looking at the stuff that's in Ilrian, I think especially if you have one of the special playbooks, that it says a lot about setting. And we don't have either of those special playbooks here, but we do have some different stuff that we're doing with magic. And so as I fill this out, like, this may be a project that is a little bit more skeletal by the end of this stream, because I still have some work to do in terms of, like, what do we want for spirits, what type of or degree of interaction with spirits is going to be most useful for, like, magnifying or drawing attention to the kind of thematic axes that we're interested in as a troupe playing the game here. Okay, and so that's a whole project. 6-part sleight clock, turn an asset with magic using a spirit, and then if I were kind of going in order, I would say, oh, okay, and then we'd take some time to unpack this into a thing. But what I think I'm going to do is go ahead and roll all the dice, and then we'll see where we are in terms of unpacking any of these, since I don't want to take all of your afternoon. Especially since y'all just finished a marathon process for finishing and releasing a game. Okay, so I'm going to roll dice again for the next one.
I need to see what
that's a 5 and a 2.
Magic.
So that's magic artifact.
A lot of magic out of me.
All right. That's fun. This may be the universe implicitly or not so gently telling me to do the rest of the work for world building on the kind of cosmological scale, because I had a good time chatting with Brandon, one of my co-hosts, who's also playing, about some of, like, the magic vibes, and we as a group went back and forth on, like, how magitech do we want to be? Like, someone in the first stream was excited about, like, what if we had magic trains? And I'm like, well, I'm game for magic trains, but that does a lot just by itself.
Yeah, it informs the setting.
Yeah, and I think what we've ended up with is magitech more like Final Fantasy VI than Final Fantasy VII.
That makes sense. Okay.
And then we've got stuff like porous volcanic stone that you kind of hang up in your house where it can get sunlight, and it will absorb the sunlight and turn that into magical power. But that magical power must then be again transmitted as if it were light. And so it's going to let me have, we're going to have a lot of fun architectural stuff where a tropical Caribbean-esque island is going to, you're going to want a lot of natural light, but then you're also going to want to be able to kind of batten the hatches and protect yourself against weather. And so, like, lines of sight and where you do and don't get light are going to be really important, which I think is going to be really fun for visuals. where somebody's invading, like there's a home invasion, and a brigand has a blade, and as soon as they step into the distributed light from the next room over, the alarm activates. Yeah.
That's really cool. The idea that like building with that thought in mind, that aesthetic in mind, means that you can. Oh man, I just had an articulation of this, and now it's in Farsi, so that doesn't help. Building with that in mind, like prioritizing that, like there's a lot of really fertile area for custom and courtesy, and how that's subverted and how it turns to skullduggery, and like, oh man, that's exciting.
All right, and so the next result was supply fashionable. So House Corinne is going to try to disrupt a supply line with like a fashion move. So this to me feels like somebody's like, I'm going to buy all the lace, or they're going to, okay, well, all of the courtiers of House Corinne are going to just like destroy an entire category of fashion. Being like, you're still wearing epaulets?
I mean, House Corinne is mechanically House Lavelle, which are the arcane gossip mongers of wealth and taste. So like there's a taste making element there, right? So we corner this, and then we make it fashionable, and then everybody has to come to us for this particular fashion.
Yeah. And so already these tables are telling a story, or they're giving a strong enough prompt that it is very easy to start telling a story, which is super cool.
Hey, the system works.
To that effect, and this is the boring part of game design, is nothing is, again, prescribed. So if you ever find yourself rolling something that's uninspiring or doesn't fit, there's no shame in reworking it, re-rolling it, or just interjecting something that you think is more interesting instead. So if like you were to keep rolling magic over and over again, and you don't actually have a huge magic system in place, or you want to avoid magic, it's pretty simple to just go, okay, well, we're just going to go ahead and change that word out across the board. So you don't ever have to stick to exactly what you roll.
Yeah, I'm actually going to take that liberty, because I did in fact roll magic again. And so I re-rolled a 4, which is going to take us to supply. So 2 and 2, a little bit less all on its own. But this is supply unique.
Ooh.
So that to me suggests like a singular coveted good, or is this disrupt a supply line with some unique thing. Is this, so I'm
that's juicy too.
To the fashion thing. I'm just taking a note to myself, like, because we have these two disrupt a supply line projects, are they going to be related? Is this going to be about the same thing, or are they going to be separate plans about disrupting a supply line using distinct methodologies, but within that same broad universe? Because Corinne and Fairest, neither of them are specialized in supply, so they're kind of a little bit outside their specialty. But Corinne has intelligence and wealth, and Fairest has force and transport. So like using transport to disrupt a supply line with something unique, is this about getting one particular thing somewhere?
It is incredibly annoying, by the way, to have your thoughts switch language, like in the midst of a thought. So yes, good call.
Yeah,
That was from chat.
I got.
Sorry,
yeah.
I didn't mean to.
Yeah. I got just far enough into learning Japanese that I could maintain thinking in Japanese for little chunks of time. And yeah, losing words just in one language is annoying enough.
The other side of that is when you start dreaming in other languages, and people that you know for a fact don't speak that language are speaking it better than you do. And then all of a sudden you're shamed by how poorly you are speaking, because your 8-year-old son speaks much better whatever than you do. Yeah, that's the other one they don't talk about.
All right. The dice really want to do magic, so
Okay.
I'm overriding.
But do we?
I'm really overriding the dice again. So we're going to do 3-2 for this next one.
Okay.
So that is going to be transport caravan for House Greymist.
See, ally transport caravan.
Make an easy ally. Okay. So we certainly do have some factions that could be courted by transporting or providing support to a transport via caravan. Some of my factions are still parenthetical. So
Yeah, thumbnail sketches, right?
yeah, I have factions, detailed named factions such as Big Trade Company, Vigilantes, Militant Revolutionaries,
Yep.
Criminals with a Shtick.
That's how they start.
With the shtick.
Yeah.
It's funny because I know each one of those.
Yep. Like it, not too long in, I think Premee Mohamed, one of our players, came up with a good shtick for one of the other factions who are now the Eels, which is a aquatic focused like burglary and kidnapping oriented gang who operate in the Sunken District, which is a permanently flooded district after a major earthquake. And so we get the kind of Venice canal gondolier types of bits in that one chunk of the city. And so that chunk has those elements, and it is standing in for the twist mechanically in terms of the spheres of influence. So it was really handy how that all came together. And it was fun to basically try to unpeel or pull back some of the layers of design, looking at, okay, here are the spheres of influence in the city, and here's how they're connected to different factions. And then we have the major faction relationships to the spheres of influence, which then inform their relationship to the factions outside the Big Six. So that is very fun. I'd love to hear a little bit about like the order of operations that these things all got stacked in, if that is something, or did they all kind of interlock together at the same time?
I don't remember. It was a fever dream. Do you remember whether we built spheres of influence before we built factions, or if we built factions before we built influence?
No, I think it all kind of happened bits by bits, because our first release, we only had the factions that were relevant to playtesting, and they had to have some controls so that you could play with it. And then as we built it out, it kind of just, some of it spooled out of necessity. Like we needed something that would give you a little bit of tension, something that would motivate you to move around the city, to care about what's happening in the different districts. So a lot of the mechanizations, the orders that they happened in are kind of fuzzy because it was a project we worked on over a long period of time. But the reason that everything came about was pretty methodical. It was wanting people to care about everything happening. Because in some games you hyper focus on your group and what your group's trying to accomplish, and in a political game, it's very important that everything feels like it's weighty. So you want to have control of this part of the city. You do not want to lose control of this other part of the city. You don't want that part of the city to fall into the wrong hands, and suddenly this thing you didn't care about is now at the top of your radar. So that was part of the motivation behind making everything have mechanical benefits.
Yeah, that and the absolute abject terror that once you have crawled your way up to having influence in this area, that it could be taken away. That keeps you on top of your game.
Yeah, I think it's very fun that there's so many levels on which the relative status of the houses interact, and that it's very thoroughly enmeshed in the overall like mechanical and narrative fabric of the world. And I think it helps convey to a GM who maybe doesn't have as much experience in thinking about like interconnected faction work. Oh, here are all the places where these connections touch. And mechanically, you start out at the bottom, you have one sphere of influence, you have a smaller set of interconnected faction relationships, and then things will necessarily get more complicated as you move up the rungs. which is good. I think is like good, almost instructional design, right?
In the same way, like your first sphere of influence, your friends and enemies that you make in that sphere of influence also have their own friends and enemies. And as you expand outward, you need to be thinking about, well, we're friends with these people who are enemies with these people operating in our new sphere of influence. Is that going to be a problem? Are we going to have to cut ties? Like, and that's that push and pull is where the political intrigue is fertile. So,
yeah, when you were doing early playtests or in what you've seen from other groups, is there like a sweet spot of outside factions in the kind of minor houses, uncouth and outsiders that like seem to be like, okay, here's a good menu to work with, versus like selecting all 32?
that's a lot of factions to juggle. Typically, the sweet spot for us when we play it is we're usually dealing with about 4 to 5 factions in the houses minor, the uncouth, or the outsiders. So usually you can cut the number of factions in about half, and that's about the sweet spot. But making sure that they're the ones that are going to inform like the theme of your story is the tricky part, right?
Yeah, because some of the factions are tied up with ideas that maybe aren't appropriate to every single story. The witch that lives under the bridge with her army of cats, that might be too whimsical for some stories. You just simply remove it. So I think tailoring the expansive number of factions down to the ones that are the most interesting for the story that you're trying to tell is actually an important thing to try and keep in mind. So I'm a big fan of the big red marker. This faction, no. This is a no. We're not doing any magic. Whatever you need to remove to make the game what you need it to be. We hopefully provided enough content to where you can be heavy-handed with pruning and still have plenty of content to tell a really good story.
Yeah, because in my home game, I ended up adding about 2 or 3 factions just because I needed, either there isn't or I can't find a tier 1 twist specific gang. And so I like, okay, here's some 17-year-old wunderkind who's like a Loch Lamora type, and they have their their little group, and they just are shit kickers who make a lot of trouble. And then like, oh, here's a fallen minor house that's where this player character comes from, and well, they were exiled for heresy, but now he's trying to build the house back up again, and that's going to be dangerous.
You got it. I mean, Ilrian is built to be huge, right? And with factions around every corner, and there's a secret society or a cult or a plot that is in every given shadow. We just put 32 of them in the book. Like they're whatever you need, like it's probably there.
Yeah. So speaking of the queen with her cats, that faction has been mechanically replaced by the Voice, who is a beloved weirdo poet who holds court in the plaza.
I love that.
Love it.
And actually, I believe that the Voice is one of the factions that this coterie has now crossed at the beginning of play, because they recruited a courtier cohort who used to be of that space. So I will probably get to be a self-important beloved weirdo poet at my player characters.
Perfect.
Which will be very fun.
Look, that's what we're all here playing for. Right?
Yeah, well, it helps that one of our players is in fact a poet by trade, and one of our other players, his dad was a publisher of poetry, and so like there's a certain degree to which I have to like up my poetry game to engage with that, when in reality, like most of the poetry that I can reach for is about 1,300 years old, because I'm reaching back to like epics and sagas.
Yeah.
Hashtag folklorist things. So that's all of that. Great. So we have the 5 projects. I'm just gonna list them out real quick, and then I think maybe we can take another 20-30 minutes if that's okay with y'all.
Sure.
Unpacking each of these just a little bit, to give me a leg up on my prep. Okay, so House Sapphire has a 6-part sleight project to turn an asset with magic using a spirit. House Lironti has an 8-part reach clock to corner a market with magic using an artifact. House Corinne has an 8-part grasp project to disrupt a supply line with something fashionable in supply. And House Fairest has an 8-part grasp clock to disrupt a supply line with something unique. And we don't know whether these are related or are in competition yet.
Mm-hmm.
And lastly, House Greymist has a 6-part reach clock to make an easy ally with transport using a caravan. So I actually kind of want to start at the end there, and I'm going to have us look at our factions to think about who's an easy ally to be gained through a caravan. Now this is for Greymist, so they are.
So I saw that an interesting interplay in the things going on that was so between Fairest, Greymist, and Kareen. Kareen is trying to corner a fashionable, as they should be, a fashionable item. So they would be really good to make an easy ally with somebody with a caravan to bring that in. And since Fairest is right between them in the house ranking, it makes sense that, well, Greymist wants to have an ally that's closer to them that's actually an ally. And Kareen wants to, of course, take Fairest's place as second house of the city. So that feels like a really easy one. It's like right there. So a really good allyship. So we already have a house that's kind of on the out in that scenario as well.
Right. Yeah, so that creates almost like an immediate triangle relationship between 3 of the 5 other houses.
I thought that one jumped out at me. Is that like because of their ranking and everything? It was an easy kill.
Now, is House Greymist trying to make an easy ally through the use of a caravan, or do we think that they're trying to engage the services of somebody who doesn't want to carry cargo for them?
Oh.
So let's see, because Greymist does not have transport, and
I'm seeing wealth and
Corinne and Fairest. So Fairest does have transport, but then Corinne doesn't. So that makes me think that Fairest is in a position to be able to inform and interfere with transport-based projects inside the city, which then I could see as like, okay, they've got enough power there that it would take 2 other of the great houses to overcome that.
Right. Maybe Fairest kind of has maybe if not like a monopoly, but at least like a large share of transportation and the things necessary to advance the agendas of the other houses. And Greymist is trying to horn in on that, in that they're trying to leverage an ally, somebody who probably wants to work with them, but Fairest probably has them under their thumb.
Yeah, because I'm thinking like transport in Valloward. There's carriages, there are kind of gondolier style boats in the Sunken District, but those are not often used by the more affluent because of the type of district that is. But what we do have in Valloward is magic trains. Mm-hmm. And so I got to thinking, like, what is it like the fashion that people wear on trains? Is it the fashion of the trains themselves? Are the trains decorated in such a way that we can connect this here? And then I was reminded of some earlier world building where there was interest in the idea that beauty in form created power in function. Mm-hmm. And so that a beautifully made, say, train car would be a more effective one. And then and that's pretty cool. And like, okay, but then also are there like special cool hats that you wear when you're on the trains? If it wasn't fashion, it was art, I would think like, like painting the trains in some way. Because at this point, for the first set of errands, one of the things I'm thinking about is wanting to showcase the cool and distinct elements of the Valloward setting. both so we can establish them within the group to understand like what we're doing, and from the like marketing the show perspective of like what is cool and distinct, as people are like, well, lots of people are doing Court of Blades actual plays, that's really cool. What is this one group's thing? What sets this campaign apart, and what sets this setting apart? So I think that gives me a lot of cool stuff to chew on. Let's see, do I need more specifics? So I'm just going to talk it through again, and I may come up with a different version than what you did, Navi, and that's not a disrespect. It's just that I can only remember so many things at once.
This is a writer's room. We're all riffing here.
So, and I have a tendency to push things towards not necessarily big, overblown, city-changing. This is the little idea that I drew out there was obviously just a almost like a petty thing. Well, I want to disrupt this thing with the fashion because it'll make them look bad at the parties, and this other house is all like, okay, I'll throw in with that because that's amusing, and it's really just a social slight. It's not a big game-changing, world-ending thing, but like all these big houses are involved in it, and that's fun to me on a level that is a little bit more airy and fluffy, and not necessarily everybody's just trying to kill everyone else.
Sure.
But if you have a darker game in particular, like if you're trying to be a little bit more gritty and cutthroat, and they wouldn't bother with these petty things, that's a terrible idea. Don't ever use that idea. Go with something a little bit more meaty.
Sure. You gotta be red. Red ones go fast.
So what I'm thinking is, I'm not like, I hate to lose the fashion element in terms of like clothes and wigs and masks or something, but I think the immediate thing that comes to mind is that maybe Grey Mist wants Corinne's backing in whatever lobbying process is to be able to officially sponsor or endow or commission a train car, and so that it will represent Grey Mist's values. It will probably be easier for them to to scry on, or to like protect with magic, or it'll just be easier for them to like, okay, cool, we're gonna do a fancy party at night on the train.
Yep.
And that then Fairest, who have transport power, clearly have a lot of influence, or they already have trains that they've endowed or controlled that then can get in the way.
That's the idea that there's this almost like race, this struggle to see who can build the biggest or the most impressive or the most lavish or the most iconic train as like the premier projection of power in the city right now. That's fashionable. That seems like the kind of thing that noble houses would be doing.
Yeah, and that will let me kind of draw some attention to the trains. It will inform how I write the season dossier of missions for the coterie, because I was thinking of stealing what you did for the Corvids and having the kind of prologue errand be just a party somewhere.
I love that. I've done 4 cold openings for Court of Blades campaigns that way. Like, you can't go wrong with a fancy party.
Right, and the home game that I did, I kept on like fancy party, and they were just not as into it.
Really?
It's.
Well, I mean, I guess there's no accounting for taste. I'm always on board for a fancy party.
Yeah, they were. What they did that was really fun for me is they went so hard on social conniving and stealth. So less of invite you to a party, more go to one of the factions involved in a situation and saying, we're actually going to solve this for you.
Yep.
But getting them to take that meeting was the way that they then set that faction up for an ambush, because they had in fact already allied with the suddenly unretired assassin who was being targeted as a scapegoat by the rival faction.
That's leading into the skullduggery as opposed to the intrigue and romance, and that's okay too.
Yeah, and this because that was an honorable coterie of Corvetto. So they
okay.
leaned on that rep very hard.
That's a lot of stuff making sense.
Yeah, and so that's all very cool. So that tells me
Kisses or knives? Which way are we playing this game?
It's a valid question.
Sometimes it's both.
Kisses and knives.
Knives and kisses.
So Fairest is trying to disrupt the supply with uniqueness.
Unique.
So is it that like has Fairest already commissioned a new fancy terrain?
It might be something that it might actually be someone. This might be them engaging for the entirety of the season, or as long as it takes, I suppose, a premier artisan or designer or something like that. That, you know, all the very best people have their work, not the inferior work.
Yeah, like try just me rephrasing what you said here. Are they trying to hire the most exclusive retainer, the very best train engineer and or designer? There is a faction that is like the guild of earth magic practitioners, Ardcraft, and they, let's see, can I find the write-up? I actually really like what I did with them, so I want to see if I can find this bit. Ardcrafters Guild. While the discipline of Ardcraft has only been known for a bit over 100 years, there is already a large and fractious community of practitioners that spend as much time arguing over theory and practice as they do plying their trade. Bohemian mess with a lot of power. And so getting to fold them in where people are going, like inserting themselves into the already tricky politics of that faction is very interesting. And then I want to think about how I can get this coterie into that radar, either to help give them a little bit of a clue as to some of the stuff that's going on, or to just kind of highlight that train stuff earlier on.
Might be a prodigy with a new practice of Ardcraft.
Yeah, or like
Leonardo flashbacks.
Oh yeah.
Magician artist, right? Where you know, somebody for whom the disciplines of Ardcraft and painting or sculpting or something are you know, they're just one thing. I don't see how everybody else fails to understand this.
And that says something about magic in your setting as well, which is also magic as art as opposed to science.
So, Navi, this triangulation idea, I think, is bearing a lot of fruit. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Pretty fertile.
It's me looking for drama. I'm gonna stab who? All right, I got it.
Everybody. Stabbing everybody.
Okay. Yeah, I think
All the
that's
time.
that's enough for me for right now for Corinne, Fairest, and Grey Mist. So I think we can look to Sapphire and Lironti. So we've got Sleight, turn an asset with magic, Spirit. So a thing that comes to mind pretty quickly for me is whose relative or loved one's ghost can we raise and put pressure on to use to turn an asset?
Oh, it's got to be an old archon of the house, right? Somebody with standing in the house. That way there's good, juicy drama within the house itself, because you're going to have the members of the family who are like, you absolutely cannot do this. And the members of the family who are like, we must do this.
You can't bring that one back. Please. We worked so hard to put him in the ground. Like,
Oh, because there has to be somebody who's afraid of what they have to say.
oh yeah, somebody's got a secret. Somebody's got bad blood.
Yeah, because if it's turn an asset, is it turning an internal asset within like faction politics of like, you know, this part of how Sapphire wants to do this thing, this part wants to do some other thing? Is it about turning an asset in another faction, whether that's a Great House faction or somebody else? I'm going to look at my faction list here. So we've got the Ardcrafters Guild included already. The Sapphire kind of has some relationship to the lake creature ? So that makes me wonder whether the person they're trying to turn is this somebody in like a faction of rebel witches who are kind of the third and smallest faction that uses the oracular fruit. Are they going to try and turn an asset within that faction to consolidate power, because they are lower on the hierarchy than Corinne. So that tells me that Corinne has greater access to this oracular fruit. And so number 2 teams up with number 3.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm really into that. That's appropriately Byzantine, I feel.
Yeah, so like with the witches, maybe that is it's raising or conjuring the spirit of like a previous faction leader. You know,
Yeah.
is there like a grand dame of that faction who passed away just long enough ago that things have changed, but not so long that the people who are around have forgotten her?
That's cool. Yeah.
It's juicy.
Were y'all 7th Sea people?
I played the is it second edition of 7th Sea? Can't have been that long ago.
Yeah,
Oh,
'cause
score.
that's only
Scored 7 years
I think
ago.
that edition is only 4 or so years ago
Yeah.
old at this point.
Yeah. So since it's been out, I can't honestly remember when I played it last. But yes, I am familiar with 7th Sea.
Yeah, because that is really the first thing in my memory that is like what Fate Witches are is
Yep.
the Vodace with kind of the Oracle vibe. Because I played in one of the few full campaigns I played in as a younger geek when I was in college. Very good game. GM by Jack Norris, who is still active in game design. So shout outs to Jack. Okay, but not so old people have forgotten. Great. I think that
Yeah.
sorts that.
Still
And-
use the Grand Dame as a point of leverage.
Yeah, but I'm curious, like, it may be especially dangerous to try to summon and bind the spirit of a powerful oracle.
Probably. That's
Like-
probably why it's a 6-part clock. Because there can be fallout and all manner of things that change. And what does the displeasure of a Grand Dame's ghost look like?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that,
I'm curious
Is
about who they're allying with in order to be able to bring her back, and what upset will spin out from that if they succeed or don't succeed, or if the home team decides to meddle with that. It's gonna be fun.
Mhm.
yeah. So making my note to myself, what are the current dynamics of the Rebel Fate Witch faction? Their disposition toward Sapphire and Corinne, because that will let me know the degree of change that this project is trying to accomplish, right? And that gives me a little bit more context. I can then use this to cast the NPCs that are going to be relevant if the players kind of stick their noses into this.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I found running Court of Blades previously is that my Dramatis Personae list got gigantic.
Huge.
And so I used basically a form borrowed from a friend where I would just cast people and start putting pictures in, which was a great opportunity to investigate a bunch of like cool Italian actors who I hadn't ever heard of before, and be like, oh, this person is actually also Italian, in addition to this other background that is the one that I actually knew, which is very fun.
Big fan of Trello. Like Trello boards with all my characters so that I can scroll through them real quick.
Sure, yeah. I I've never spent enough time in any of the big like organizational project management apps to get over the like too many things hump.
Yep.
And so I still, as you can see, I'm using Google Sheets and Google Docs.
We write everything in Google. So.
Yeah, I'm the queen of Notepad.
Thanks,
Anytime
Google.
I need to write something down, I have more notepads than anyone should ever have in 2022. So
Yeah.
like old school, I've been using this for 30 years. Notepad, writing it down.
That's a text editor. I can code in it. If I need to do
Right.
graphic design, I can probably do graphic design.
I'll figure it out.
Figure something out.
Yeah, I hear legends that George R. R. Martin still uses WordStar.
That's probably why the new book isn't out.
Oh,
So somebody needs to like just get some RAM and better processors somehow hooked up to an ancient machine.
Yeah. It's cool.
So that's
Write it all on my Apple II.
That's a 6-part reach clock.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm pretty sure.
Right. And then our last is, in fact, a reach clock, but it's 8, corner a market with magic using an artifact. And I don't think this necessarily has to be related to anything else.
So this is Almar. This is Libranti.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Mhm.
Some kind of artifact. Tell me about where the Libranti came from. Is it Ronte?
Yeah, Rontus. So
Rontus. There we go.
in this archipelago, there's probably between a half dozen and a dozen islands that are inhabited.
Okay.
But Valor Isle, because of the work of the Dialta, centuries and centuries ago, has magically created storm breaks of just like underwater earthen structures that will break tidal waves or something. And so they have natural environmental protection against severe storms, and they're the only island in the archipelago that has that. And so Valor Isle is really the place where there is a full bustling port. The other islands tend to, they basically have commuter boats where you go to Valor Isle and then you're going to be making a longer trip.
Right.
And so I imagine there is a lot of movement back and forth between Valloward and the island of Rontus, which I describe the folks of Rontus. Let me get my background stuff. I will pretty soon need to reorganize all this information because it's going to be too many things to keep track of. So this is me kind of translating the heritages write-ups. If you want to be from the region but not Valor Isle itself, choose Rontus. Denizens of Rontus and the other islands of the archipelago share Valowar's vivacity and passion, but are more circumspect and community-oriented out of necessity, with a chip on their shoulder over Valor Isle's many blessings.
Okay. And do the people of Libranti still have kind of that same chip on their shoulder?
Yeah, I think they there's probably a little bit of cultural drift because they've learned to play the game of Valloward, where you have to have that bravado and that confidence, because ostensibly when we did Ex Novo, how is this place ruled was a caste system, which we kind of lined up with. If you have if you are regarded as valorous and kind of having the qualities that is what got the veterans this place, that is what gets you status, which that gives us kind of a slightly different permutation of what chivalry and the courtier paradigm is.
Noblesse oblige and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and so I think this artifact could be from Rontus, it could be from Valor Isle itself, or it could be from some other nation. Here's this distant nation that is that kind of basically has god priest feudalism, where you have very local control in your religious framework, and then here's this other country that is it's a little bit, they're a little bit dwarves, but not like the people of that nation are not actually little people. Rich mineral mining nation, and like that is the nation that is like probably the chief competitor to Valloward in terms of like you did in the intro, the greatest city in this or any other age.
Right.
The other people who would claim that are in that nation.
Right.
So that may be a place to look. That that there's an artifact from Seven Eye, this other nation, that Liranti, already having an outsider's perspective, maybe they don't have the like the ethnocentrism of the Valloward of like, well, everything that's important is here, like
Right.
a lot of New Yorkers have.
Sure.
I say this as someone who has lived in New York multiple times. And so it would be Liranti who would go, well, here's how the Valloward system works. You know what was really going to disrupt that is this thing that I've heard about from somewhere else.
Interesting.
The question then is, what market are they trying to corner with an artifact?
So, knowing what I know from the setting, I'm always looking for those ties into the established fiction. They're the middle house. They're probably pretty ambitious. I feel like if the trains are important and magical, it could be interesting if they are trying to corner the market on whatever powers them, whatever fuel source is their primary fuel source, or something to that effect. That strikes me as something that would elevate your status in the city dramatically if you have a lockdown on the supply that keeps the city moving.
It might be something from, what is it? From Seven Eye. From
An 8-part also kind of suggests something huge, right?
It might be like some kind of either, because you mentioned they have a vaguely dwarvish like probably like work ethic, right?
I was hoping it was going to be ore.
No, I'm thinking like a refining machine or process or something, but it's like, because it is an artifact, like I'm thinking that almost feels like prototype here.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so like magical internal combustion engine. That is cool because that intersects with the triangle, with the triangle train situation, but
parallel to it.
yeah, or like I guess it could intersect depending on how far which people go and what House Vorster is actually trying to do with regards to the train, if anything.
But well, you know for a fact that if Liranti, manages to fill its clock before the triangle situation is fully resolved, all of those houses are immediately going to be trying to court Liranti. And how does House Vorster deal with that, right? Because Liranti is in a place where they hold all the cards, and all they can do is go up unless we do something about it.
Yeah, and if the coterie uncovers really any one of these 4 plots, that will put them in a position to be able to respond far more quickly than otherwise. They may not get around to it until the 2nd, maybe even 3rd season of play, at which point they're already several steps behind. Very cool.
Which is fun. And if they miss it and they succeed at cornering the market, you get to have fun with how that changes the way that transport works within the city. Suddenly everything has been upgraded, and now there's a more powerful faction running around too because they provided that upgrade. It's fun.
Yeah, this is making me think like, so there's chunks of time when subway cars in New York were just like covered in art, graffiti and sometimes other stuff. And then of course you have a lot of airlines will just do fancy art with their planes. And so in keeping with the beauty, focus on beauty and the status that comes with it, different train cars painted in the house colors of whoever is their, the patron.
What a flex.
Yeah.
That will make people angry.
Yeah. And so there will be times when you're like literally on enemy territory because this is a gray mist train.
Mm-hmm. That's fun.
Because that's, you're going to get all sorts of bonuses in terms of magic.
Absolutely.
Because they're going to, we've got all of our magical scrying stuff on this train. So, whatever happens there, we're going to know about.
Mm-hmm.
That is very cool because I find that being able to make magic material in some places while still being fairly numinous is really handy because it gives you something to hold on to. And
Yes.
so being able to have magic that impacts or intersects with the senses and things like that. Big Tiger Man, we are in fact not, we don't have a live play session today. There was a schedule conflict for one of the players. We were scheduled to play this last Friday, but when we have another confirmed session, I will make sure to shout it out across all of the social medias. As with many situations, the greatest enemy for any tabletop group is scheduling.
Tier 6.
Great. So that is the big plans of the 5 other great houses of Valloward. And now I think my brain is very full of possibility. And we definitely ended up in a different place than I would have gotten to on my own.
Sure.
Because of being able to bounce stuff off of a couple of extra brains with a lot of experience using this system. So I want to say again, thank you so much to Navi and Shawn, aka a couple of Drakes. And before we head out, I want to invite you again to let folks know where they can find you and the games that you make.
I'll go first now.
You're going first this time. I went first time.
I'm Navi. I'm one half of a couple of Drakes. We wrote Court of Blades and a boatload of other games. We just released an Ashcan today for a game called No God's Country, which is a troop style Forge in the Dark game of desperate resistance. So if you got a little political anger you need to get out at the table, it's healthy. It's a healthy way to do it. We have a Kickstarter for Dead Belt coming up next month. I think those are our big projects. What you got?
Yeah, so Dead Belt is the project that we're going to be kickstarting. That's how you say that. Kickstarting next month, starting September 5th. That is a solo tabletop role-playing game.
Now with co-op and rivalry.
Now with co-op and rivalry mode of basically disaster capitalism in space, scavenging junk spaceships, and trying to pay your ruinous debt. It's a lot more fun than it sounds. But you can find all of our games on a couple of drakes.itch.io. You can keep up with all of our updates on our Twitter, mostly where we live. She's at Navi Musing. I'm at Drake and Dice, just like it's spelled. And you can find all kinds of other stuff on our website, a couple of drakes.com.
That was much better. Yeah. More robust.
I don't know about that.
Giving good outro/intro and staying concise is a skill, 100%. And it's one
I'll get there.
I've been my nervous mode is extra chatty, so yep. I sympathize, empathize, and identify with this.
Salad.
Yeah. So thank you to everyone who is watching live. Thank you to folks who are watching on the VOD later on, which will appear at youtube.com/ArvinElleron. And as a reminder, this series, Valloward, as well as Fractal Spire, our game of Girl by Moonlight, is supported by the Speculate Patreon, which you can find at patreon.com/speculate. Right now, all of that money and more goes to paying our lovely audio editor, Rudy Basso. So if you would like to see us do more projects, bigger projects, weirder projects, mini-series, interviewing designers like the Drakes, but in a different situation, or doing any other number of things, then you can help us make that be by going and becoming a supporter at patreon.com/speculate. There's 7 GM streams that I did for a previous series, which was Rebel Crown. We've got bonus episodes with the 3 hosts talking about different elements and ideas and aspects of tabletop role-playing game, episodes about recommendations, behind-the-scenes features for previous shows, and there'll be behind-the-scenes stuff for Valloward as well. So all of that and more awaits you at the Patreon. And for now, I will say farewell, take care, and keep your sword handy.
Welcome, dearest retainers, to Court of Blades, and welcome to Valloward, the greatest city in this or any other age. A city where hearts race and swords flash, where intrigue and danger lie around every corner. Centuries ago, celebrated veterans were given title to Valor Isle, a place long abandoned by its first residents. Here, the heroes found ancient secrets, bountiful land, and a fruit bearing oracular gifts. Generations later, 6 families vie for ultimate control of this jewel of the archipelago, each seeking to lead the great dance of houses. A new retinue rises to clash with flashing blades, veiled plots, and powerful magics in pursuit of their house's interests and their own secret ambitions. Speculate presents Valloward, a Court of Blades campaign, starring Premee Mohamed, Marie Bilodeau, Brandon O'Brien, Gregory A. Wilson, and your dancing master, Michael R. Underwood. Be welcome, retainer. Get comfortable, but not too comfortable. It's time for Court of Blades.